Does the Foreign Secretary agree that Britain must continue to play a role in these negotiations, even though they must seem an incredibly difficult and challenging prospect?
Yeah. Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, for her question. Only a diplomatic solution and the correct framework can ensure that we keep the global community safe.
The echoes of Iraq are haunting Westminster tonight. In a tense parliamentary session that laid bare Britain's foreign policy dilemmas, MPs delivered a blistering interrogation of the Foreign Secretary over escalating Middle East tensions, and the answers they received should concern every British citizen. The ghost of Blair's war. 21 years after Britain followed America into Iraq, the spectre of that catastrophic decision loomed large in the House of Commons. MP after MP rose with pointed questions that cut to the heart of British sovereignty. Are we once again being dragged into another American military adventure? The parallels are chilling. In 2002, Netanyahu himself promised that regime change in Iraq would bring enormous positive reverberations. Instead, it unleashed chaos, claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and destabilized an entire region. The Chilcot inquiry's damning conclusions, that future military interventions must face rigorous scrutiny, now seem prophetic. A foreign secretary under fire. What emerged from today's session was deeply troubling for British democracy. When pressed on crucial questions, the foreign secretary couldn't, or wouldn't, tell Parliament. 1. Whether recent strikes were legally justified. 2. Whether Britain would have a vote on future military action. 3. What concrete lessons from Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan inform current policy. This is not transparency. This is evasion. The people's fear. Across Britain, constituents are reaching out to their MPs with genuine fear about the fallout of US intervention. These are not abstract policy debates. These are real concerns from real people who remember the promises made before Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction that never existed, and the endless wars that followed. Their instincts may be right. When a foreign secretary boasts of 25 years in Parliament but refuses to engage with the hard lessons of recent history, when he dismisses legitimate scrutiny as mere sound bites, alarm bells should ring. The nuclear shadow. At the center of this crisis lies Iran's nuclear program. Uranium enriched to 60%, dangerously close to weapons-grade material. The Foreign Secretary is right that once you have the ability to enrich uranium to 60%, that knowledge is not lost. But here's what he won't say clearly. Military action without parliamentary approval, without legal clarity, and without international consensus risks making Britain complicit in another disastrous intervention.
I have said that we're going to do things differently. We're going to tell the truth, even when they are hard truths.
The questions facing Britain today are stark. Will Parliament assert its rightful role in decisions of war and peace? Will we learn from the catastrophic errors of Iraq? Will British foreign policy serve British interests? Or will we once again find ourselves as junior partners in America's Middle East adventures? Stay close as the conversation begins.
Alongside Israel, whose attack last week ended the US-Iran negotiations for a new nuclear deal, and given that the war aims of this campaign are so unclear, an emboldened Netanyahu government is calling for a regime change, and President Trump is hinting at it too. It can be difficult to see how in all those circumstances there can be negotiations based on trust. Yes. Does the Foreign Secretary agree that Britain must continue to play a role in these negotiations, even though they must seem an incredibly difficult and challenging prospect?
Yeah. Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, for her question. And it goes to the heart of where the UK should be at this time. And that is at the centre of the diplomatic effort. A diplomatic effort that will be necessary at the end of this process. Because sadly, once you have the ability to enrich uranium to 60%, that knowledge is not lost. It is the stepping stone to an advanced weapon. and therefore only a diplomatic solution and the correct framework can ensure that we keep the global community safe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I welcome the Foreign Secretary's calls to move this to a negotiated solution and his focus on UK defence and security. He's right, Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. However, history also teaches us on the issue of regime change that interventions aimed at regime change in Iraq, in Libya, in Afghanistan have produced prolonged instability, not just in the region but far wider. So what concrete lessons does he believe can be learned from this recent history in shaping Iran policy today?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, but he'll forgive me. I'm not going to enter into a history lesson from the dispatch box, except to remind him that on Sunday I achieved 25 years as an elected parliamentarian, and during the course of that period, of course, there has been debates about regime change. But I also remind him that the US has been clear that their attention is to target the nuclear threat, and we should keep that in mind.
I agree with much of what the Foreign Secretary has to say, but I do have to ask him, how many times must a terrorist-funding, fanatical regime threaten to wipe another country from the face of the earth before a government advised by Lord Hermer of Chagos acknowledges that military action to delay and degrade its nuclear weapons program is both ethically and legally justifiable?
Foreign Secretary.
I simply say to the right honourable gentleman, and I say this with all respect, there is a convention in our country about the very important role that Attorney Generals play in our government, able to give government advice when asked for. It happens under all governments, and I don't really recognise the caricature that I've heard or some of the reports. And I want to make it crystal clear, we were not involved in this action, and therefore, really, some of what's being said is wholly beyond the pale.
Abtesam Mohammed.
Mr. Speaker, many of my constituents have contacted me over the weekend, fearful of the fallout of US intervention in Iran. They know, and we know, that wars do not make the world a safer place, but much more dangerous. Their concerns are not unwarranted. In 2002, Netanyahu offered a guarantee that regime change in Iraq would bring enormous positive reverberations to the region. But we now know that there was no imminent threat, and there were no evidence of weapons. The scale of the disaster, not just in Iraq but across the region, was so profound that the Chilcot inquiry insisted any future military intervention must be met with rigorous scrutiny. Does the Foreign Secretary accept this scrutiny, and will he again provide reassurance to the House that we will not enter an endless war fuelled by provocative, reckless provocateurs?
Foreign Secretary.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and just to say to her, I was in the House during that period in which Chilcot was making his work, and of course I'd want to reassure her that our government, and I hope all future governments here in the UK, have learnt from its findings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a lot of people watching and worrying over the weekend, they'll have seen many of the hallmarks of Iraq. Yet, despite that, the Foreign Secretary can't tell us whether he believes these strikes were the right thing to do or not. The Foreign Secretary can't tell us whether he believes that these strikes were legal or not. And the Foreign Secretary has failed today to outline whether this House would be given a vote on any potential military action in this conflict. Is he purposely treating the public as fools?
Foreign Secretary.
I've got to say to the honourable gentleman, he may just have got a soundbite, but I'm really on the nuclear question. I'm not going to take lecturing from the honourable gentleman, I'm afraid, who's got a very sorry record in relation to that very serious matter. We have been very clear that diplomacy is the way, that de-escalation is our position. That's what you pursue if you're serious about foreign policy, and I recommend our approach to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I first join the Foreign Secretary in thanking our brave service personnel from RAF Bryce Norton for repatriating British citizens back from Tel Aviv. On this Armed Forces Week, I think we are all grateful for their courage and sacrifice. Yeah. On Iran, let's be clear about the regime. It has killed thousands upon thousands, upheld brutal suppression of democracy, rights of women and LGBT+ people. It has demonstrated a consistent intent to sponsor terrorism and act through proxies and with violence in order to destabilise the region. But all military action must go through the process of international law, and it must be executed based on a plan and intent to return to democracy. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that we must do what we can to support de-escalation as soon as possible?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for his service in the RAF, and I'm sure he's thinking about former colleagues at RAF Akrotiri and across our 2 sovereign bases in this area, and about our bilateral defence partnership with so many countries in the region particularly. And I'm very pleased to make it crystal clear that the path through this is a diplomatic one, is for Iran to return back to negotiation and to recognise the power of the global community being absolutely clear. They cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Bob Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good news that the Home Secretary has finally decided, reportedly, to prescribe the treacherous terrorist group Palestinian Action. Now, given that she's done that at great speed after the attack recently, and the IRGC have conducted attacks or attempted attacks on this country multiple times, will he now use his powers to persuade the Home Secretary to prescribe the IRGC in its entirety?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, and the prescription question is always an issue for the Home Secretary. In the decision that she's made today, it's important to stress that it's a process involving all the relevant agencies and their assessment in the activities. But I have to say the attack on RAF bases is disgraceful and totally unacceptable, and the force of the law must bear down on it. She keeps prescription under review. I know it's a long-standing issue that this honourable gentleman's raised.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Iraq showed the grave dangers of following a right-wing US president into an illegal war for a regime change. The consequences were hundreds of thousands of dead, mass destruction, mass devastation, regional chaos and wasted resources. Many fear that the same thing is happening now. So will the Foreign Secretary confirm that any such war on Iran for regime change would be illegal under international law? And will the Foreign Secretary confirm that he would oppose in UK involvement in any such intervention, in any such war?
Foreign Secretary.
Confident in my engagement with the United States and the discussions that I've had, including those in the White House last week, that this is not about regime change. And I should remind the honourable gentleman that the Israelis too have been clear that they are not attacking the civilian leadership in Iran.